Well, good afternoon and welcome to the ordinary meeting of Wellington Shire Council on this, the 1st of September 2020. Before we start, we need to kick off, because of the COVID situation and the virtual meetings, we will commence with a councillor roll call. So here goes nothing, I think, at the moment. So, Councillor Ripper, I've got you.
I have got you too, Mayor, and the other councillors. I can also see you and I can also hear the volume.
Thanks, Councillor Ripper. Councillor Crosley.
Yes, I can see and hear you, Mayor.
Councillor McCubbin.
I can see and hear you, Mayor.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I can hear you and see you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Marr.
I can see and hear you.
Councillor Bye.
Yes, I can see and hear you, Mayor.
Councillor Hall. We might come back to you in a moment. Councillor Rossetti.
Can we sing Happy Birthday to Councillor Marr yet?
Not yet.
Thank you, Scott.
Mr. Mayor, I'm currently having IT problems, and they're working on it backstage to try and fix up the...
We can now see you and hear you, Councillor Hall.
Yes, but it's been dropping in and out now. So I can see and hear you, but I just hope we can stay that way.
Okay, so at this point, and the CEO, you're here as well?
Yes, Mayor.
Excellent. All right, so we're ready to roll on. Okay. So just in starting, as the COVID-19 social distancing requirements continue to remain in place, the Minister for Local Government has issued the Minister's Good Practice Guidelines, MGPG1, virtual meetings, pursuant to Section 87 of the Local Government Act 2020. These guidelines ensure the local government decision-making can continue in line with COVID-19 requirements, and further details can be found on the Local Government Victoria website. These guidelines took effect on the 1st of May 2020 and will remain in place through to the 1st of November 2020. While members of the public can no longer attend meetings in person, we've provided options for you to interact with us virtually via our council meeting page on Wellington Shire Council website. You are able to interact with council in two ways. You should have emailed through a specific question or comment relating to a particular council agenda item by no later than 1 p.m. today, or for general communication with council via the webcasting chat room early in the meeting to ensure that your submissions can be dealt with at the end of the meeting. While we face a new way of gathering, we thank you for your continued support and look forward to a new way of keeping in touch with all of Wellington Shire. And in the current circumstances, there is no need to stand for either the acknowledgement or the prayer. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Gunai people, and pay respects to their elders, past and present. Almighty God, we ask for your blessings upon the Wellington Shire Council, the councillors, officers, staff and their families. We pray for your guidance in our decisions so that the true good of the Wellington Shire Council may result to the benefit of all residents and community groups. Amen.
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 Okay, we have no apologies. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest? Take silence as no. Moving on then to item A4, confirmation of minutes of the previous council meeting. Councillor Bye.
Thanks, Mayor. I move the council adopt the minutes and resolutions of the ordinary council meeting of the 18th of August 2020.
I understand, Councillor Marr, you'll second that?
Yes, I shall. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Councillor Bye, nothing further in regard to that?
No, thank you.
There are no business arising from the previous meeting. No late items and no notices of motion. Move on to item A8. Item A8.1, outstanding petitions, there are none. Item A8.2, response to petition request to seal Commercial Street, Yarram. Councillor Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council authorise the Chief Executive Officer to write to the head petitioner advising that Council will commence engagement with property owners on Commercial Street, Yarram, to progress a street upgrade project through a special charge scheme in line with Council's residential road and street construction plan.
Thanks, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Marr.
I'm happy to second that, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Marr. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm very excited to see that we can progress this scheme. The residents have been interested, or certainly some of the residents have been interested in Commercial Street for a number of years now, in having the street sealed. And I mean, there is a note of caution, of course, Mr. Mayor, that we need to make it very clear that, of course, there are a number of projects ahead of this one, but certainly if we can start the wheels turning, start engaging with the residents, then hopefully maybe in 18 months we can get this project up and running. And I'm pretty sure that there's by far majority support for this proposal, certainly much more than the 60% that's council's policy now before we can complete a street scheme. And given the amount of vehicle or traffic down Commercial Street, particularly trucks that use it as a bit of a shortcut to get into the commercial lane, which is across James Street, this will be a very positive outcome for all the abutting residents. So thank you, Council, for your support.
Thanks, Councillor Stevens. We move on to item A83, response to petition request for a bike track, pump track in Gormdale. Councillor Marr.
Yes, Mayor, I move that to decline the request for a bike track, pump track to be constructed in Gormdale on the basis that it does not fit Council's provision guidelines for bike tracks, pump tracks, and to authorise the Chief Executive Officer to write to the head petitioner to advise them of Council's decision.
Seconded, Councillor Crosley.
Yes, happy to second that, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Crosley. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that the Gormdale community will be disappointed with this decision. However, I do know that they're a strong and vibrant community that have much passion for the place where they live. And I know that moving forward, they will be able to put a positive construct on this outcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Marr. We have no invited addresses, presentations or acknowledgements, CEO.
Sorry, man. On mute, none.
No questions on notice. I understand we've got no delegates reports today, so we'll move straight on to item C 1.1, Councillors' response to COVID-19 and municipal recovery update. Councillor Crossley.
Thank you. I was on mute. Yes. I move that Council's response to COVID-19, specifically the outcomes of multi-agency pandemic emergency response exercises that have been recently undertaken, be noted.
Second, that's Councillor Bai.
Happy to second that, Mayor.
Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Crossley.
Thank you, Mayor. Under the State Emergency Management Plan and the relevant legislation, the Wellington Shire Council is responsible for responding as a relief and recovery activities through pandemics, as well as our usuals of bushfires and floods. We've been working very closely, and planning is always crucial in these areas. And recently, as this report is laying out, there have been a number of scenarios that multi-agencies have explored and to see if we can plan for some hopefully things that don't occur in the future, but it's always best to know your capacities and to make sure that you can make sure that you've got those areas covered. So there were areas on looking if there was a larger outbreak in the Wellington and how we would respond to that and how the multi-agencies would respond. There were sort of areas that were highlighted that could be of issue with the limits of capacity to do contract tracing locally. Also the roles and responsibilities of whether there would be enough agencies to respond and how that infection control would be covered in the community, and also what would be the responsibility of the various agencies to look after the vulnerable in our community. It's really important that these areas are pressure tested so that we can do the desktop planning so we're ready for these occurrences. As we say, hopefully they don't occur. It was also interesting that at the COVID-19 meeting that we had last week, that we were informed by DHSS that they do have local contact tracing teams in the Latrobe Valley, so they have switched to get some really on the ground and local knowledge in that contact tracing, which has been most essential and been seen to be a good covering component to get the best outcome. Also, another key outcome of some of the desktop training or scenarios was that we would need to have different services arrangements if there was another emergency on top of this one, and how we would cope with relief centres. And we will certainly have to get communications out of how the community will be able to respond if we have a fire or a flood event and these restrictions still apply, because our usual recovery centres wouldn't be able to operate, so they'd have to make other arrangements. So there's going to have to be a fair bit of planning into the future to meet these, but as I say, planning is essential, and it's what we're doing to make sure that the community is safe in any eventuality. Other areas that have been continued, which the community would have been noticing and have really responded positively, is the promotion of the Be Kind Wellington, that's looking after that social connection through the social media platform, and also the highly successful Wellington Still delivering, which the businesses have pivoted to both online and takeaway services with many of the, or call and pick up services for many of our local tradespeople and businesses throughout the Shire, so they can be congratulated. And also I'd like to give a big shout out to the neighbourhood houses that have been created great services for their community in providing meals and support services, and also the uptake and the planning of the when we've got the relief information hotline. So we've got staff that have changed their roles to support that, and also the development which we outlined last council meeting, and the planning for looking after social engagement for those that have been isolated. So it's a two-pronged approach of both the economic support and also the social support, and also the staff that have been doing direct contacts with businesses to make sure that they're getting all the government assistance that is available now, and any other supports, and certainly the continued support of fee releases and rent relief through the Shire. So thank you for the team working in there. And I should actually say that the community have responded really well in the continuation of observing the stage 3 restrictions. We all know it's really tough out there for the individuals, but they're to be congratulated in really making sure that our first responders are protected by not ending up in hospital. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Crossley. Given the importance of this matter, if anyone wishes to speak to it, that opportunity. If not, could I just simply add, our staff again continue to in fact show what they're made of, particularly in this emergency management space, and their groundbreaking work with the COVID committee, focusing on particularly living well as part of the recovery process. And as you mentioned, Councillor Crossley, both in the economic and the social space, they continue to demonstrate a leadership role which is of interest to others in this sector, and should be increasingly proud of the work that they're doing in this space. So thank you for that. If we could move on then to item C 2.1, Assembly of Councillors. Councillor Bye.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move the council note to receive the attached Assembly of Council records for the period 10th of August 2020 to the 23rd of August 2020.
Stan, you want to second that, Councillor Ripper?
Yes, I'll second that, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ripper. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Bye.
That's right. Thanks, Mayor.
Moving on to item C2.2, Remuneration Committee Minutes. Councillor Hole.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm going to move the council note and receive the minutes from the Remuneration Committee meeting held on the 4th of August 2020 as attached. And 2, council endorse the actions from the Remuneration Committee meeting held on the 4th of August 2020 as detailed in the attached minutes.
I understand you're going to second that, Councillor Stevens?
Yes, I'm happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Hole.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, this is a quarterly statutory meeting that from a delegation point of view from councillors to review the expenses of the councillors. And I'm pleased to say that it's a good report. As always, we are very frugal other councillors in comparison to most other reports you see from councils around the state. 2 or 3 things that came out of the meeting was the checking on the timing of the existing councillors' allowance heading into the election because of the time span from closing until the swearing in of the next lot of councillors. We're just checking on the legal implications, and so they'll be duly noted at the next meeting. We've also asked for the councillor budget for 2021 to be received at the next meeting. That hadn't come before the Remuneration Committee, but we'll have a look at that. Our costs, as I said at the start, are well contained, but it's an interesting look through the scale and see that the phone bills are a little bit higher than we had budgeted for. And this has been brought about because in the early days of the COVID problem, we had to use hotspot, and of course that puts the charges up. But overall, travelling very well, and you can all be very proud of yourselves.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. We move on to item C2.3, the MAV Microsoft Enterprise Agreement 3-year renewal. Councillor Rossetti.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I move that Council 1 adopt recommendations contained in confidential attachment item F1.1, Municipal Association of Victoria's MAV Microsoft Arrangement Tender Evaluation Recommendation Report, contract NPN 217-3, to approve the renewal of our Microsoft Enterprise Agreement for a period of 3 years, and 3, note the information contained in the confidential attachment item F1.1, MAV Microsoft Arrangement Tender Evaluation Recommendation Report, contract NPN 2.17-3, and particularly the reports designated under section clause 2A, bless you, of the Local Government Act 2020, which is deemed confidential by the General Manager of Corporate Services on the following grounds under section 3.1G2 of the Local Government Act 2020, as it contains private commercial information which, if released, would unreasonably expose the business to disadvantage by disclosing financial information to competitors, except that once this recommendation has been adopted, the name of the successful tenderer can be made public.
I understand, Councillor Crosley, you'd like to second that?
Happy to second that, Matt.
Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Rossetti.
Just say, Mayor, that anyone who's been in any sort of an office environment will understand that the software, like that software made by Microsoft, is bread and butter of most people at any office desk. This tender allows us to get the best value for the ratepayers to have everything properly licensed as it should be, but rather than floating by ourselves, we're part of a bigger tender. 3-year period, it makes a lot of sense.
Thanks, Councillor Rossetti, and I'm pleased to announce that the successful tenderer as Crayon Group Australia Proprietary Limited. We move on to item C2.4, Adoption of Governance Rules and Local Law Number 1. Councillor McCubbin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that Council approve the amended Local Law Number 1 and the new governance rules, which include Council's election period policy as attached.
I understand you'll second that, Councillor Bye.
Yeah, happy to second that, Mayor.
Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor McCubbin.
Thank you, Mayor. I've always been proud of the fact that despite the fact that we disagree in a civil manner, that our meetings are conducted in a proper format. And that is because we have boundaries, and without those boundaries, meetings could easily degenerate into the red wedding. And thus it is important for us to have a group of rules that we can all agree upon. Now, many of these rules are based upon legislative requirements, but some of them are adapted to our own personal needs. Now, I gave this a bit of a spruik up last time, and I'm pleased to hear that nobody actually responded with any responses, except for the councillors themselves, which is to be understood. And we had a rather robust discussion in regard to the set of governance rules. And I'd like to congratulate my fellow councillors for the way they entered into that. We had a very big conversation, and there has been some amendments made to the draft guidelines that were admitted earlier. Thus, I am very proud now to announce that we have a new set of governance rules based on our current practice, so there's nothing that's remarkably different to what we are doing now, but certainly will held us in good stead moving forward. Now, for those coming in on the new council, and I'm sure there will be, they needn't worry. These policies are regularly updated, and I'm sure if people have their own particular things that they wish included, then that could be included down the track. But right now, I feel confident that with these rules, we can continue to have civil council meetings into the future. And I thank our fellow councillors for their hard work, and for the staff for making them all happen. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor McCubbin. If we move on to item C 2.5, adoption of council expense and administration policy. Councillor Marr.
I move that Council approve the updated council expense and administration policy as attached, having been revised as required under Section 57 of the new Local Government Act 2020. Yeah.
And I understand, Councillor Ripper, you happy to second that?
Yes, I will second that, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ripper. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Marr?
For those who are interested in finding out about a councillor's allowed expenses and reimbursements, then this is the policy to read. Under Section 41 of the new Local Government Act states that a council must adopt a council expense policy, and it must be adopted by the 1st of September. So this brings us in line with that. There are a couple of changes with regard to the policy title change, and sections have been updated according to the new Act. It also includes legislation with regard to the Carers Recognition Act of 2012 and governance rules. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Marr. If we move on to item C 2.6, adoption of a public transparency policy. I understand you've got this one as well, Councillor Marr.
I do have this one. I move that Council approve the new public transparency policy as attached and as required under Section 57 of the new Local Government Act 2020.
I understand you'd like to second this one as well, Councillor Ripper.
I will second that motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Marr?
Thank you. Once again, this is bringing things in line with the new Local Government Act of 2020. This is a new council policy that will be reviewed annually, and its objective is to clearly outline what council information is publicly available and what is not, and how the information is made available to the public. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Marr. Moving on to item C 2.7, adoption of Audit and Risk Committee and Charter. Councillor Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council, as per the new Local Government Act 2020, the Act, 1, endorse the continuation of the existing Audit and Risk Committee, which meets the requirements of Section 53 of the Act, and 2, approve the adoption of an updated Audit and Risk Committee Charter as attached, which meets the requirements of Section 54 of the Act and has been updated to include the correct references to the Act.
Understands Councillor Crossley will second that.
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'd just like to make the observation. It's very pleasing to note that very little change was needed to our existing rules of operation and also to our charter. It wasn't that long ago that Council might remember we actually confirmed the charter, and if I'm pretty sure we need to do that on an annual basis. And really, just on the issue of the charter, the only thing we needed to change was basically the references to the 2020 Act as opposed to the 1989 Act. And apart from that, our Audit and Risk Committee has been functioning very successfully for over four years now. Prior to the existence of the current council, we have strong community representation on that committee, and the community can be, I think, assured or reassured that the Audit and Risk Committee is forming a very useful function and doing an excellent job in, even if I say so myself, being a member, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, that the committee is doing a good job in the duties that are required to oversee financial and risk management issues of the council. So, and that will continue to happen now under the 2020 Act with very little change, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Stevens. If we move on to item C2.8, approval of C6 instruments of delegation, community asset committees. Councillor Crossley.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council 1 revoke the instruments of delegation and Section 86 committees of management as previously established under Section 86 of the Local Government Act 1989. 2, approve the instruments of delegation as attached to establish and appoint the community asset committees under Section 65 of the Local Government Act 2020. And 3, delegate the power to approve future committee members' appointments to these community asset committees to the Chief Executive Officer.
Understand, Councillor Ripper, you're happy to second that?
I am very happy to second that. Thank you, Mayor.
Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Crossley.
Thank you, Mayor. This is another one of what was above, is that this is to comply with the new Local Government Act 2020. This is actually a legacy of our pre-amalgamation days, in that these 5 committees operate quite differently to all of our other communities under the past Section 86 structure. So these will transition, the existing committees will transition to this new format, and will actually lift some of the burden that they've had of having to comply to bring their minutes in a special format through to council, like the other committees are not required. And also another difference is, although under this committee structure, the committee members will be appointed by council, but as it says on Section 3, that the approval and the delegation comes under the CEO. So as I say, this is just complying to the new Act in the time frame that the government assisted on, but certainly the 5 committees of Brayagalong, Cameron, Sport Complex, Gordon Street Reserve, Maffra Rec Reserve, and the Newry Rec Reserve, those members aren't under threat or anything like that, and we do value their input and their volunteering for their communities. So it's just a legislative process of switching it over to this new compliance.
Thanks, Councillor Crossley. We move on to item C3.1, June 2020 planning decisions. Councillor Marr.
I move that Council note the report on recent planning permit trends and planning application determinations between the 1st of June and 30th of June 2020.
Councillor McCubbin, you'll second that?
Indeed, I will, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McCubbin. Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Mayor. A copy of decisions are found at attachment 1. And looking at the figures, one will see that 45% of the decisions are for the coastal ward, 30% with northern ward, 25% are in the central ward. At attachment 2, it provides recent trends of decisions and so forth. Applications received are on the increase, as are active files at month's end. However, one can observe when looking at the valuation of works graph that there has been a decline during the COVID period of 2020, which is to be expected. However, I'd really like to commend the continued work of our planners and the constraints that they are currently under, as they are certainly operating and continuing under very trying circumstances. So well done to them.
Thanks, Councillor Marr. We move on to item C4.1, Revitalising Our Region project. Councillor McCubbin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that in response to the announcement by Darren Chester, MP, Federal Member for Gippsland, allocating $8 million towards the multi-year $14 million Wellington Shire Council Revitalising Our Region package of works, as described in this report. Council 1 authorises the Chief Executive Officer to finance applications and agreements for federal government funding of at least $8 million to contribute towards the Revitalising Our Regions package of works. 2, note that initial funding of $4.25 million to support the Revitalising Our Regions package of works has been allocated in the adopted 2020-21 budget. And 3, approve the additional funding of $1.75 million already allocated across the 2020-21-22 and 22-23 forward capital works budgets to support the Revitalising Our Region package of works.
I understand, Councillor Crossley, you second that?
Happy to second that, Mayor.
Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor McCubbin.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, this is tremendous news, and I'd like to begin by thanking the federal member, Darren Chester, for his extreme work in advocating on our behalf to get this across the line. Let's understand what this is going to mean for our community. It's the undergrounding of existing overhead power lines on York Street between McAllister Street and Stall Street. It's the streetscape works on York Street between Ragnar Street and Foster Street, including the installation of centre median lighting. These two things will absolutely revitalise our main street into our major town. The installation of centre median lighting on Foster Street between York Street and Reeve Street, and the installation of traffic lights, the intersection of York Street and Cunningham Street Sale. This is near the McDonald's and area there, which has always been a bit of a concern. Council said they'd keep an eye on it, and the idea is that we're now looking to install traffic lights on that and amenities through all this. It's really, really important that our main towns have a main street that is inviting, that people then will stop and go in. And for those people on Raymond Street that are a bit worried about this, I tell you, if cars are passing through and York Street's looking really schmick, which is what it will do, and particularly the undergrounding of the overhead power lines will make a tremendous difference, then people are more likely to turn left and to go down our main street, stop and spend some money, which I think is really, really important. Now, but it's more than that. It's also looking at the Port of Sale, upgrading to the existing boat ramp. And I know in conversations I've had with the boat ramp, with the boat people down there at Sale, they're looking at maybe improving that a bit more. That'll be great. The improvements for existing moorings and installation of a seawall, construction and sealing of existing car park around the back there of the Port of Sale, the construction of access works and boardwalk and pedestrian bridge, and further on the Sale Wetlands project with improved pedestrian connectivity from the Port of Sale through Lake Guthridge Parklands, pedestrian crossing on the South Gippsland Highway near McMillan Street, Lake Guyot Environmental Education Centre, Lake Guyot Boardwalk Renewal, and so on and so forth. Look, and I should just mention, subject to receiving the federal grant in partnership with the Rotary Club of Sale, constructing the next stage of the River Heritage Trail through the Sale Common. And these are great tourism assets for our town. Not only will I thank Darren Chester, who's done a tremendous work in this, can I also thank the unsung heroes in the back of the staff at the Wellington Shire, people people often wonder what those people are doing out there, doing the strategic plans and things like that, and can often be dismissive of that work. But I'm telling you, if council doesn't have a set of strategic guidelines, if it doesn't have the planning authorities, if it doesn't have the designs of the installation work, if it hasn't done all the back works to ensure that this can be done properly, if we haven't got the governance right, if we haven't got that strategies right, then there's no way known the feds are going to give us the money. You know, the feds don't give you money on you know, a nice story and some hand waving. They actually give it to you when you make a strategic recommendation forward. And understand that because of that work of those people behind the scenes, we have now got $14 million of works that are going to take place within our town. $14 million worth, and that is a huge asset for our communities moving forward. So, look, a really big thank you to our economic development team, our infrastructure team, our planning team, and the CEO himself, and all of those people who are working behind the scenes to ensure that we get the plans right, so that the federal government can move in and give us the money. And what we're asking now is that the CEO can just complete that work to liaise with our federal member Darren Chester, who is of course done a wonderful thing for us in this, and that we move forward with the beautification of Sale. Well done, team.
Thanks, Councillor McCubbin. Excellent job to all concerned. Well done. Moving on to item C5.1, Aqua Energy Redevelopment Concept and Cost Plan Approval. Councillor Bye.
Thanks, Mayor. I move that Council adopts the concept design presented at Council Workshop on the 21st of July 2020 for redevelopment of Aqua Energy Attachment 15.1.1 in accordance with the funding strategy presented in this Council report, enabling community engagement to proceed to finalise the schematic design and to enable application for external funding contributions.
I understand you'd like to second that, Councillor McCubbin?
Absolutely.
Is that motion opposed? If not, motion is carried. Councillor Bye.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just put a bit of background first. Back in 2015, the Council engaged a consultant. The consultant's role was to develop an aquatic strategy for our facility. In 2018, we engaged another consultant to construct a business case to look at the current facility up at Aqua Energy. Now, I was not born when this facility was actually constructed. It is over 53 years old now. I've not quite reached the age of 50, so it precedes me. It is an old, ageing facility. The idea of updating the facility was to just replace the pool shell. Under further investigation, we need to do a bit more than that. The actual pool hall as well is quite old. Being 53 years old, there is a bit of work we need to do with that. You can see some great pictures that are in our report, but things that we're going to do. If you've been into the 25-metre indoor pool, to go from the main access along Foster Street, you have to go down a ramp to get to the pool from the top deck, or you have to go downstairs. The accessibility isn't perfect. Part of this major upgrade will be it'll be all on one level, which will make it so much better for all of the Wellington Shire residents. We will also have an indoor play facility. Yes, a water park for our children of Wellington Shire residents. Will be able to play indoors all year round. The existing pool will retain all 6 lanes, but those lanes will be made wider. They will come up to current standards from what they are now. There will also be an access ramp next to the pool to have full access for all disabled to be able to get into the pool as well. The change rooms will be all fully updated to current standards, and the sauna will be updated as well. We're going to also update the access from the members' car park or the top car park. It will now have easier access, and we will eliminate the stairs that are there currently, which are quite cumbersome to navigate. The gym will have a 24-hour access. Rather than having it limited now to the hours of the operation of Aqua Energy, we'll now have full access 24 hours a day. This sounds great. It's a $13 million project. Yes, $13 million. It's not a small thing for the Wellington Shire to undertake, but it's well and truly overdue with a 53-year-old facility. It's not easy to get the money for this, but we must, first of all, thank the John Leslie Foundation. They have pledged $950,000, and that is 100% confirmed towards this project, which is just amazing. So thanks again to the John Leslie Foundation. We will now go and source money off the Victorian Sports and Rec, and hopefully we can get upwards of their funding, which is $3 million, and we'll try and access other state and federal funding grants that are available. So this is an exciting project, and we have now approved to go to the full-on drawings and look at funding this, so we are serious. And it's going to be a great facility that will be updated for all all residents of the Wellington Shire for many, many years to come. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Councillor Hyde. Did I miss something then? No? Okay. So I can move on to item C5.2, Maffra Recreation Reserve Committee of Management minutes. Councillor Ripper.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that Council receive the minutes of the Maffra Recreational Reserve Committee of Management's general meeting held on the 6th of July 2020.
Second for that, Councillor Hole.
Yeah, second to Mayor.
Is that motion opposed? If not, the motion is carried. Councillor Ripper.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a short report. Whilst all the users at the moment, as we all know, due to COVID-19 Stage 3 restrictions, the annual show is not going ahead, the annual dog show is not going ahead, and football is not happening. However, we have very important volunteers who are continuing to make sure that the grounds are mowed, that all the water resources are being looked after and there's no water leaking or spreading out everywhere and making the area wet when it shouldn't. And also the Ag Society has been able to source a $260,000 grant from various Victorian government areas, the Show Society, and they are in the planning stages of having a dome, an all-weather dome built in that area there, which will be able to be used in the food court and various other areas for Maffra Shire and further Wellington Shire. Also, the committee are working towards an enclosure in the old cattle pavilion area for an off-leash area for dogs, and this area is where the annual dog show is being held. So that's just in the early stages of working with the Shire, and this could be a pilot for you never know, future enclosed areas. So they're all working with the Shire towards making that Maffra Rec Reserve a better reserve, and whilst no one is using it at the moment, they can do lots of work there to have it ready for future football, the dog show and the annual show. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ripper. No urgent business, CEO?
Sorry, Mayor, none, no.
No gallery and chat room comments to deal with?
None, Mayor.
I just seek Council's indulgence. There's no need to move into closed session. No one has a need for anything, and so we'll move on. So we get to the point where I get to say, in closing the meeting, a very happy birthday to Councillor Ma. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and thank you very much, and declare the meeting closed at 42 p.m.